Today, I'm going to be ranking ERG metrics on a tier list. My name is Maceo and I go by the ERG Homegirl. I'm the CEO of the ERG Movement. Now, these metrics I've heard in the space all over. People are oftentimes confused. Which one should we measure and how should we measure it? We're going to go through this list of ERG metrics just so that you can have a better understanding of where to start and the most impactful metrics for your ERG program. Starting first with member count. This is something that, at minimum, every ERG should technically have. So, member count, the number of people within your ERG. However, there are many ERG programs who don't have a clear answer on this. I cannot tell you the amount of times that I've spoken to ERG leaders and asked them the simple question of, how many members do you have? And oftentimes they don't have the answer. They say, well, it depends on how you determine membership. Even then, let's just imagine that you have a beautiful membership onboarding process and you know exactly how to determine your membership list. Whether it's channel lists, distros, forums, whatever it may be, that one source of truth. From that, is that an impactful metric? I wouldn't use this as a success metric for your ERG program. A number of reasons why, but really just to go through a couple of them. Thing one, this number will fluctuate along with the company. If the company goes through a cycle of growth, like super growth, you're gonna get a lot more members. And on the flip side, if your company has a reduction, you're also gonna lose members. This is not an indicator of your ERG success or lack thereof. It is really just the ERG fluctuating with the size of the company. Not to mention, when you make member count a success metric, that is when ERG leaders all of a sudden strive to get as many people in the ERG as possible. And all of those initiatives that are towards getting new people in your ERG space will signal to current members that you don't actually care about them. It'll result in things such as cross-promoting ERG events in many even irrelevant channels, sending company all-out invites, and other not useful growth techniques. There's a better way to grow your ERG, and honestly, ERG growth should not be the end-all be-all. And let's be honest, are you trying to get every single employee in an ERG? Probably not. For that reason, I'm going to rate it a B. Quick overview, S tier, top notch. These are the metrics that you want to have at minimum with your program. Truly as success metrics that really communicate a message and a strong story to executives. A tier are good indicators of success. So while these metrics in of themselves aren't necessarily a do or die for the program, it is a good indicator of those S tier metrics. B tier, not so much. I wouldn't even really mention B tier metrics when it comes to executives. But again, there's something good to consider in the background of your program. The ERG program likely has no direct effect on B tier metrics. And honestly, B tier metrics are not true success metrics, but they are a good to know about the program. A cool story type of thing. C tier metrics, not the greatest ones to use, and they likely do very little to communicate the impact of your program. And F tier metrics, I would just steer away from completely. So we're going to run through these. Stay till the end. The last metric I say will be the number one metric that every ERG program should have a handle on. Participation is another one. Now, people define this differently as well, but how I like to say it is anyone in the organization who has interacted within the ERG program at all, even if they're not a member. So I also like to say this as the ERG program reach. Executives are likely curious what the participation rate of your ERG program is. So this is a good metric to have handy. However, again, the goal is not to get this at 100%. The goal is not necessarily to increase this so that every single person has been touched by the ERG program. So I will put this at an A tier. Employee resource groups impacting retention is another common topic out here in the space. However, the thing is, this is something that I personally have never encountered a single ERG program who's been able to tie higher retention rates with an ERG program. Now, I get it. ERGs are ideally building on the culture of an organization, and ideally an organization has a strong culture so that it would retain people. However, unless you are measuring this truly, and this is something that you couldn't even measure at a point in time and just look at it right now if you haven't been tracking it historically. This is something that you would have to track over 5, even 10 years to truly understand the correlation between someone who's an ERG member and them staying, because you would have to measure it over time of them staying. Even then, I'm sure you've heard the phrase, people don't leave organizations, they oftentimes leave their manager, which means an ERG might help someone to be happy while they are at an organization that they may hate, but ultimately, when they find that better opportunity, they are going to leave. An ERG alone is not going to hold someone to a company. And honestly, it probably shouldn't. If someone's that disengaged from a larger company perspective, it's probably time to find a new home, if you will, where you don't have to have those feelings. I would also put this metric on tier B. It's a good to know kind of in the back of your head, and it is good to inform ERG leaders in case they want to do programming to learn more about opportunities to maybe help create a better member experience if there is a high turnover rate, low retention rate for their community. However, again, not a direct indicator of ERG success, because even the best ERG will have people leave the company because it's about so much more than just the ERG itself. Number of people on an ERG committee. This is essentially what it sounds like. The number of people that an ERG has on its committee. Huge F. Okay, I cannot restate that enough. Thing one, as an ERG program manager, you should be determining the role structure that exists within your ERG programs, not the ERG leaders. And even then, once you have it as a success metric, the number of people you have who volunteered to be on a committee, that means that you're going to start having influx of volunteers, which is only going to increase the blurriness between roles as people step in and oftentimes even overstep roles. Having an ERG team that is too large is a mistake that I have learned myself not to make. When you make the success metric the number of people on your committee, again, what are you signaling? You're signaling that ERG leaders are responsible for growing their committee and that the bigger, the better, when that is simply not true. You actually want a more nimble, more lean team that's able to execute based on a clear, bold description that ideally you set out. So there wouldn't be any sort of confusion on how many leaders should be in an ERG team. Number of new ERGs. Yes, some companies do use this as a success metric, but the thing is, very similar to the number of committee leads, you have to consider what this is signaling. When you say the number of new ERGs is a huge success metric for our program, you're signaling that the more ERGs, the better. As a program manager, I couldn't see how you would think that, because I'm sure you know that that means the more responsibility on your end. Also, too, you cannot have this infinite ERG community system, at least not right now. For companies right now, it's important to really hone in the communities that we already have set up and to create better processes for them to operate efficiently, not to continuously launch new ERGs. And when you do that, you actually spread thin the hands of people who are willing to hold up a single ERG. You want to make sure that you're able to hone in, starting ideally with those underrepresented communities, the ones that may be more likely to not feel seen in the workplace. And once you really perfect engagement for them, and honestly, that is a long time. That is not just saying that you've had an ERG for many years, even decades, but actually saying that you have processes that are proven and that works, and that you understand what the best practices are to engage the audience at your company, and it shows in the scores, and your ERG leaders are able to get things done without being burnt out. And now you're saying, okay, now that we've perfected this system, we can then scale it and then launch new ERGs. And that's why I'm not a fan of just waiting for employees to approach you with an ERG. As an ERG program manager, you should have on a roadmap what communities even qualify for an ERG, and ideally a year-by-year breakdown of when it will be appropriate to introduce new communities into the structure. And if that was the case, then that would mean that you're actually just executing on your strategy. So number of new ERGs, not necessarily a success metric. While it is something to note, again, not an indicator of ERG program success if you launch a new ERG. And because of the dangers that come with launching new ERGs, just because, I'm ranking this as a C tier metric. Channel engagement scores. For context, this is about the percentage of engagement that your communication channel is experiencing. Formerly known as the Slack engagement score, the communication score averages up the number of posts and emoji reactions over the number of people who opened up your channel. And with that, it comes out with the metric. This metric has been essential for me when it comes to working with ERGs and helping them to stay accountable to, one, posting regularly in their communications channel and ensuring that they're making opportunities for their members to have these connection points, but also even to make sure that the communications that they are posting are actually engaging. Some companies that I've worked with haven't had any posts in their channel, therefore no engagement for the past 3 months. However, once you put a metric on the table versus just saying, let's try to get more engagement. Our channel feels a little quiet. Let's try to get a little bit more. Putting a metric goal has been a game changer and actually helping them to feel like they're making progress towards a specific number. Not just like, okay, I think we did a little better this month, but I don't really know if we did better than last month. There's a specific number and you're able to track it over time. And even if the month is a little bit lower than others, you can then say, well, okay, well, what did we do this month versus last month? Or maybe what are some new things that we can try? So again, when you have the metrics, it really is a guide for you to make better decisions to reach your goal. Communications channels are one of the core ways that members engage within an ERG. And the health of them actually is of interest to executives, especially if they're seeing all these posts come through in the channels or they're hearing about them. It is a plus to say, well, people are actually engaging in it. It's not like we're just posting just to post. So I'm putting channel engagement scores at an S tier. One of the best metrics then that you can measure is your channel engagement score. And again, it really helps to communicate to executives how connected your community is and if there is even a sense of community based on the frequency and the percentage of participation that you're getting. If you've heard me speak about channel engagement scores, then you've likely also heard me speak about active membership scores within your channel. So your channel active membership scores. Very similar, except for this is really just saying what's the percentage of your members who've opened up your communications channel within the last 30 days. This is an interesting metric, and I will say it is a good indicator of success. Because if people aren't opening up your channel, it's likely that they're not engaging in your channel either. However, this metric in of itself is not an indicator of success. I oftentimes see this number fluctuate based on what's happening at the company. So if it's performance review time or even just the end of the year, oftentimes this number can fluctuate. But as long as the people who are opening it up are participating, again, your channel engagement score, that is key. This other one, it's just a good indicator of how referenced your channel is. And even potentially if your members are viewing your channel as a resource. Because if they think that nothing's going to be there or it's going to be a waste of their time in there, they're not going to open it. Quick hack, I would also say if you use @channels and @hears, those are two things that really decrease this metric. There's a direct correlation with ERGs that do that more and people who are muting the channels. So putting that out there as a learning. For those organizations that are newsletter only, obviously you can't really track your engagement with newsletters that well unless it's like clicks per newsletter, and that just gets a little bit V2. Not a huge fan of it. However, you can measure the percentage of your distro list that actually opened up the newsletter. So this is very similar. So same thing with channel active membership is essentially the percentage of people who open up your communications channel. If the only communications channel that you have is a newsletter, it's the same thing. Again, however, not a success. So for that, I rank it at the A tier. It's a good indicator of engagement, but it's not a do or die for engagement itself. ERG leader onboarding success rate. That is a mouthful. I'm going to have to come up with a different name for it, but it is a new metric that I've started using and I'm a big fan of it. And this is really for the accountability of the ERG program manager. When running an ERG program, it's your responsibility to ensure that the onboarding of new ERG leaders is streamlined, so much so that they understand what they're supposed to be doing and they're able to execute on their role on a consistent basis. With this metric, this is the percentage of leads who have been able to hit their input metrics for the first 6 months after they've been onboarded. I'm sure if you went through a round of succession planning before, you found out that not everyone who volunteers is really in it for what it is. Maybe they thought the ERG was something different. Who knows what it could be? However, if 6 months in, there's still not clarity in what they're supposed to be doing, the frequency of what they're supposed to be doing, and again, those input metrics, that is an indicator that onboarding probably could have gone a little bit better. Yes, we have to put the accountability on ourselves. So this is a new metric that I've been using just to understand, okay, have I created processes that are simple enough? And also, have I created an onboarding process that was successful? And this is how I'm gauging successful onboarding. Because onboarding is really essential to a successful ERG because you have to understand what you're doing, I rank this as an A metric. It's not a direct success metric of an ERG. However, it's a good indicator of if your ERG is successful if the leads were properly onboarded. Event NPS. This one comes up a lot. And let's be honest, most ERG programs are not measuring this on a consistent basis. Every now and then, you might ask for people to rank how much they like the event. Or even worse, I hate seeing when ERG leaders say, how likely are you to recommend this to a friend? Which is so vague, and honestly, it's so not fitting for in the workplace. So even if you are going to do an NPS question, it does not have to be that exact phrase, and I recommend that it wouldn't. However, when it comes to event-specific NPS, so asking members to rank how much they like the event, I think that this is something worth doing and worth doing consistently. However, do I consider this a true saying that the program is successful or not based on high NPS? No, for a number of reasons. One of the major reasons being most people who rate something, it's only because they really love something or they really hated it. Very rarely in between. And oftentimes every single person who was part of an event does not have to rank it. So even then, it's a little bit skewed every time that we do an NPS for an event because, again, not everyone's going to rank it. Only those people who are passionate, and even more so when it comes to ERGs, people for the most part know that this is volunteer work and they're a little bit more forgiving. So oftentimes they're going to be a little nice with their rankings. Not a direct success if your events get a high NPS ranking, but it is a good to know. So for that, I'm ranking it a B. Now in that same vein, what about ERG NPS overall? So members ranking their appreciation for the ERG. Two caveats with this one. If the question that you're asking for NPS is, again, how likely are you to recommend this ERG to another friend? It is so out of context for the workplace. You do not have to use that question, and it honestly does not make sense to do so. So if it's that question, yeah, we're going back down to like a B. But in general, if the question is asked right, I would actually put it as an S metric. Now, let me explain when I say asked right. How do you ask this perfectly so that it's worth ranking as an S metric? Here's the thing. Instead of asking a general question that's not even relevant in the context of ERGs, ask this question based on the purpose of your program. I've done videos about the 3 Ps of ERGs, and this is essential to keep in mind because if you have a clear program purpose, one that your executives have signed off on and they said, yes, this is why the ERG program exists, then you can ask this NPS based on what that purpose is. So how well is this ERG meeting its purpose? That's next level. And for many, I'm going to give a spoiler alert. Your purpose is somewhere probably in that belonging field, which is different than how a lot of us think about ERGs. I get it. However, ERGs are really scaling employee engagement initiatives. And even just as a hack with this entire video, learn what your employee engagement team measures and how they talk to executives when it comes to saying that they're successful or not, and use their metrics for your ERGs. That's another super hack to streamline this entire video. You can use those employee engagement metrics, and yes, you'll be much further ahead than you probably are now. But even just beyond that, when you use the exact terminology that your executives have signed off on, when understanding if the program is meeting the goal of employees that executives expect it to, that is what communicates to them a message. This is what you said the ERG program was going to do, and this is what is showing that it's going to do. And even though these metrics are just rankings, technically qualitative data, but still quantifiable because it is a number that they're ranking it, it is a game changer when talking to ERG, when talking to executives. There's so much more clarity around this conversation, and honestly, it is enough. But we try to do the most with our metrics and say, hey, we're doing all these things, when oftentimes if we just double down on the thing that the program is expected to do, that we know it can do, and that we're able to track, you're going to go so much further with these executive conversations. So again, if you ask an NPS question based on the purpose of your program, we will put it at an S. If it's a general, basic metric, it would be a B tier. This next one, number of ERG initiatives where you consulted the business for external impact, C tier. Here's why. ERGs, employee resource groups, at their core, it's in the name. Even though some of y'all get sneaky and try to change the name so that they're business resource groups, they're still employee resource groups, just with a different name. And even then, they have to have employees at their center. At their core, they have to. Otherwise, you have just basically assembled a diversity council, which many organizations nowadays have. They've taken out the community and the power of connections from ERGs because it was unknown how to quantify that. So we just doubled down on
We need to make the business money.
It's so interesting, however, because ERGs are widely understood to be cost centers. The people team is widely understood to be a cost center. However, somewhere down the line, people started saying that ERGs had to be revenue producers, where that is so far from true. I have some hunches on how this came about, but honestly, it doesn't even matter how it happened. The problem is that it happened. And unfortunately, now a lot of ERGs have been misdirected to focus on all the wrong things when it comes to their program. External impact is one, where I'm just going to say it honestly. ERG leaders are not qualified to consult the business externally and be an end-all be-all decision maker when it comes to external facing things. ERG leaders are always going to recommend things based on their own subjective opinion. Even recently, I spoke to an ERG leader whose marketing team and product team consistently consulted their ERG, and he was over it. He was like, I don't want you all to do this anymore. And the reason why is because even recently, the product team was reaching out to do something that was relevant to their community. And one of the leads of the ERG was like, actually, I don't like that, but I do have a better idea. Here's something that you can do instead. And the product team went along with whatever the ERG leader said, thinking, hey, you're from the community. I'm not. We'll just go with what you have to say. And wouldn't you know, the product completely flopped. Not a good look for the ERG program, and ultimately very distracting from what the ERG program is about anyway. And this is typically why the conversation of free labor comes up for ERGs, because that is when you're turning it into a job. That is when it's laborious, when you're asking them to come up with ways to make the business money, when oftentimes people just want a way to connect with their community. That's why ERGs start in the first place. And even when I do sessions with entire companies and I ask employees to rank why they joined an ERG, number one answer consistently is just to connect and to network with others. Why is this being taken away and taking out of ERGs? I don't know. So even this specific metric, the number of initiatives and the number of times an ERG has consulted the business externally, is actually one of the worst metrics that you can measure. Now, I get for some companies, you approach ERGs differently. More power to you. And right now, at least your executives are saying, look, we do want to know that. We want ERGs to impact it, because they're going to say that until you correct them. Even if this is burning out your ERG leaders, even if you don't have a strong community, they're going to be like, hey, whatever, we're going with what you say, because you are the subject matter expert. So while you're doing it, sure, you can still use it. We'll put it at a C metric, second from the bottom. But in general, I have half a heart to put it at an F metric, because again, I probably should actually scratch that, moving it to an F metric. Because in all reality, ERGs should not be doing this. They should not be doing this. You should have a professional who understands that community and that department, and have them to consult the business. I said what I said. We're leaving it at that. F metric. Number of ERGs with bylaws and role descriptions. This one was an interesting one to read. F metric again. Why? Because this is not something that should vary ERG over ERG. Your ERG program should have a strong structure, a uniform structure that all ERGs follow. And that's actually on you as the ERG program manager, not on the ERG leaders. So that being said, the number of ERGs with these bylaws and role descriptions should be all of them or none of them. Simple as day. And that is really just based on, have you implemented processes in your ERG program? That's not a metric that we're looking at. That is a task that you need to do. Side note, I'm really not a fan of the word like bylaws. I feel like a lot of this older language that's being used for ERGs is part of what's holding us back. Can we just call it what it is, please? Anyway, employee engagement survey results. Comparing those for ERG members versus non-ERG members. Seems like a good idea, and there are perks to it. This is a good indicator, but it could work either way. And I say that to say, let's say hypothetically, yes, you could compare ERG members versus non-ERG members and see that ERG members ranked higher from an employee engagement score. And yes, that would be a win. It would be saying that people that are part of your ERG, they have a higher connection towards the company. But what if you did this and the number was lower? Would that indicate that the ERG is not successful? No, it would not. See, the thing is, again, the context of that survey. The engagement score is talking about the company at large. Your company might have some problematic issues when it comes to the community that the person is part of. Your company might have some work to be done. There might be some executive tensions happening, like where there's kind of some beef between senior leadership and general employees. Someone could really have a problem with their manager and just feel like it's not being addressed from an HR perspective. This is not an indicator that the ERG has a problem, but oftentimes the employee engagement surveys are an indicator that the company at large and the company culture has a problem. ERGs might be the only thing holding up the company culture, but the employee may still realize at large that yes, the culture is a problem. That being said, I'm actually going to rank the employee engagement survey correlation at an A, a good to know, a good to have, maybe even a potential conversation starter with an executive success metric for an ERG program. What about promotion rates for those who are part of an ERG versus those who aren't? Same exact concept that I just mentioned. Yes, it could be indicative of something, but oftentimes there are way more factors at play than just being part of an ERG. Truly, just like how people don't leave a company, they leave their manager, oftentimes promotion rates and things such as that are directly correlated with someone's relationship with their manager. Not always, but oftentimes there is some piece there to consider. So again, I wouldn't use this as a true success factor of ERG. Ranking that one a B. Budget utilization percentage. Now this is one that I like. It's not just about how much money you have, which is a metric that I've seen out there. I'm ranking that an F because that's something that's not necessarily indicative of an ERG success. However, I would say that with the budget utilization, if an ERG is allocated a specific budget, it's important to know that they are actually using that. Bonus points if you are able to tie that with the number one metric that we will mention very shortly, because then that means that they were using their budget in a way that actually engages the members. And that is, again, the goal. Monthly checklist completion rate. This is really about the collective input metrics of the ERG leaders being done. Ideally, yes, you would have a monthly checklist of what needs to be done within an ERG. And as things are completed, you're able to check those things off. And at the end of the month, you're able to see for each ERG, what's the percentage of completion for this checklist, again, on a monthly cadence. This way you can keep track of how healthy the ERG is, or if there's any roadblocks with the processes that you have created. I am a big fan of this, but I actually wouldn't use this one either as a total success metric. This is just a good indicator, because if all the leads are doing their roles, there's a good chance that you are going to have good engagement. We are going to rank that an A. Number of attendees. This one comes up a lot. This circles back to what we talked about at the beginning of this. If your company increases or decreases, this number is going to change. Again, not a direct correlation of success, and even then it does not scale with an ERG. You see, you might have a women's ERG, who's oftentimes the largest, and yes, they might be able to get more people to an event, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it was an impactful event. And even then, I've seen large events with large speakers that did not result in anyone joining an ERG. So even if people outside the ERG were invited, some people didn't join. And even in some cases, the members gave feedback that that big speaker that all these people went to see really wasn't impactful to their community. So again, more people is not necessarily the answer. Which brings us to our number one metric, noting that the most important factor within an ERG is its community, the members that are part of the ERG. That being said, member engagement score is what I would say is the number one metric. What the member engagement score measures is the percentage of members who've participated within an ERG over a given period of time. I like to look at it on an annual basis. This engagement is more than just them being part of an ERG, but it's also factoring in, have they attended at least one event or participated in at least one asynchronous activity over the course of a year. When you measure this and really have this as a core metric, and bonus points if you make it a goal across the entire program, it is a game changer with actually getting ERG leaders to understand the singular goal that they're charging towards, the North Star. And as the program develops, there might be some more advanced ways in which you can drive member engagement, but this is a great place to start. One of my absolute favorite metrics I actually didn't mention in this video. Make sure to check out the article below and learn about all of the metrics that I've ever heard in the ERG space and what your take on them should be. Comment below what metric shocked you and which one you're looking at maybe a little bit differently. I'll see you all next time.